verse number 4, Jesus says, I. The first word we see tonight is the word I. There's so much behind that word I. It was a specific I, and everybody in this room has an I, an individual I. Many people think that God created you and I, and then he says, now what can I do for you, a job for you? I need to create something because you got saved or you surrendered your life to the Lord in a meeting. And so I'm going to come up with a ministry, a Sunday school class, maybe a spouse, maybe children, maybe a bus route, maybe a giving campaign or something to give. I'm going to create a job for you to do. I'm going to give you purpose. You need purpose. That's not what the Bible teaches at all. The Bible teaches that God had a job, something that needed to be done long before you were ever thought up. A job, a calling, something that must be done, and he created you for the job. Now that's a fundamental truth from the Word of God that we have to get in our mind so that we can have the right priority. You can start in the book of Genesis and you can work all the way to the book of Revelation, and you can see that God had a task, something that needed to be done, and then he created you for it. God had the garden. He had the calling for Adam, and then he created Adam. And then God had the Adam, and then he created Eve for the Adam. And you come all the way down through the scriptures, even in our text, and he's saying, I had a job, a work of God to show you, to those here by the wayside, to see that I am the Son of the living God. And this man was created for this job. The job, I didn't just think up, oh, I need to heal somebody today. No, I created him because I saw on this dusty road one day that I was going to heal somebody, so I created somebody to heal. That I represents the body that was prepared. Have you ever noticed that in the Christmas story, particularly, you hear the word thing? Have you ever thought about the word thing? This holy thing that shall be born of you. Why would the Bible call Jesus a thing? Because you and I are not pre-existent. We didn't live in heaven before. No, God formed us and created us and placed us in the womb. We understand that. But Jesus was pre-existent. And the Bible calls that thing, when it speaks of a thing, it's speaking of the body. He said, a body hast thou prepared. He said it could not be the blood of bulls and goats, but a body was prepared for a specific task. The task was there before the foundation of the world, and this is the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. Now I am brought to the kingdom for such a time as this, as Esther was, as Daniel was, as Joseph was, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was, as Jonah was, as Paul was, as Timothy was, and on down through the scriptures. There was a task, a calling from God, and God created an I. The year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. And after he has this incredible vision of God, he hears the voice of the Lord, Isaiah chapter number 6. Whom shall I send, and who will go for me? There is a task and there is a servant for the task. But will the servant surrender for the task that he was created for? I don't think that this task that God was speaking about in Isaiah chapter number 6 was just for anybody. I think it had Isaiah's name on it. And Isaiah said, here am, send. My wife and I went to Africa. It was my first missions trip, and I grew up in small town Washington, Iowa, in the comfort bubble of Christianity and church and America and the luxuries of life here. And it was a shock to us to see the billions, though we didn't actually physically see billions, but if you've ever taken a mission trip, you say the world's a whole lot bigger and a whole lot more needier than I thought. We were overwhelmed. We were just constantly, our eyes were just tired from tears, because everywhere we went, from every orphanage and every feeding center and every Bible club underneath the tree, we saw people that were hungry for the gospel and souls being saved and lives that were broken that needed help. And we were so overwhelmed with this thought that there's so many people, us, me included, sitting back home in our comfort bubbles, not realizing that God has somebody that we can reach. Somebody's life that we can touch. And their name has our name on it, our specific eye. This was an eye. He said, it's my eye. Nobody else can do this eye. Nobody else can do what I can do. I am the sinless, holy, perfect Son of God. I was born of a virgin. I was brought to this earth for this task, and nobody can do this task but me. But he says, you and I have works that are even greater than these works, and the works were there long before you ever came. He said, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. But then he goes on to say that you were saved and foreordained to walk in these works. It was, you were designed for these works. And my wife and I were overwhelmed that there's so many people in great churches just like this that are sitting around waiting for God to conjure something up for them, but not understanding the weight that there is a work, a calling with your name on it. There are works at the North Liberty Baptist Church. There are dollars. There are children. There are visitors. There are lives with your name on it, and you were designed, coded, created just like somebody in the tech world that creates something for the task, just like Steve Jobs, agree or not agree. He just didn't think up, oh, hey, I think I'm going to create this. He saw the need, and he created the remedy. And so my wife and I went back one evening, and my sister Rachel, who's younger than I am, and they're just pouring her heart out in this third world, National Geographic kind of a country, starving children. And she made fresh papaya juice, and we were supposed to just have a relaxing evening and fellowship and play board games there in Tanzania. It had been a long, hot, hard day. We'd gone up into the mountains and met people that came out and touched my wife's hair and just realized they're lost. They're lost. We wanted to shake everybody and say, just go somewhere. Find somebody. Find something to do. There's somebody you could reach. And we sat down, and there was a mud road that went in front of Jerry and Rachel's house there in Tanzania, East Africa. And me and Jerry began to talk, and I began to talk about this. And my wife, we had tears in our eyes. We were just so overwhelmed. There's so many people, and they're walking up and down this road just aimlessly, going nowhere, just trying to live from day to day. Just if you've ever been on the mission field, you see they just try to live from bite to bite. And the words began to flow. Jerry would say a line, and he said, that sounds like a song. And my wife would write a line, and Jerry, who's not musical at all, and right then and there, we even pulled out our phone and recorded this song. Now, this recording was done a little bit more professionally that you're going to hear in just a moment. But in the spot, in the moment, God anointed this thought that I'm preaching tonight, is that you hold an eye in your hand that was created for somebody, for something, for some calling, for some purpose, and you'll never be at victory and at peace and at joy until you surrender your eye. Until you say, God, it's out there. I'm not trying to find my ministry. Well, here's what I do. Here's what I feel. Here's what I want to do. No, it's finding what God has called us to do, what God has created us to do. And she just began to write the words. And this song, we even have the recording where you can hear us swatting mosquitoes. Just listen to the first verse of this word. You can close your eyes, and I just want to take you on this journey of this thought that you're holding an eye in your hand. Play that for us, and I just want you to go on this journey with us this evening. If you play that song, thank you. We'll just play just a second of it. Jesus says, I. It's a specific I. It's an individual I. They're writing this as they're looking at the dirt road with people walking up and down.
Their faces look so earnestly, their eyes are pleading longingly, wondering where their next meal will be. Just trying to make it day to day.
Think about it.
As their life so quickly slips away, with never a thought of their eternal destiny.
Here it is.
A world away, how blessed we are to live in this great land of ours, surrounded by such luxuries and wealth. We think we know of sacrifice, yet we give so little of our lives. It's time for us to look beyond ourselves.
Take our eye and bring it to Jesus. Listen.
There's someone you can reach, someone's life that you can touch. How could you give so little when we've been given so much? Someone future is depending on what you will do. And to someone in the world today, their only hope is you.
Thank you very much. And God placed Jerry and Rachel there as an individual eye that he saw Morogoro, Tanzania, the Faith Baptist Church, and all the ministries there. And God already had it and then created a Jerry Wyatt, created a Rachel Wyatt for that individual task, for that calling. I want to play one more little quick clip by way of illustration to bring us into our individual eye. Rachel this Sunday called our family on a family group chat basically, and I recorded it. I didn't ask permission if I could play it tonight, but this is just this week, and she told this story. It's about 60 seconds long, and it ties into this individual eye.
Yesterday, we were having this ladies' meeting in a really rough area in our city at our church, one of our church members' houses. And it's an evangelistic ladies' meeting, and we had about 40 ladies there and a bunch of kids sitting on the mats. I was teaching on wise women build their house, foolish plucketh it down with their hands. And right whenever I entered into like the salvation part of it, we hear this terrible like crashing and banging, and we were kind of near this main road. We were at this little mud hut. It's a really rough neighborhood. We were around the corner. Everybody starts running and screaming and running over there. All the women jump up and start running over there. And we were like, what in the world is going on? I thought somebody was shooting. Some bombs were going off or something. So we're trying to get everybody calmed down. And David said, I saw a car just flip, like completely flip. So we get everybody, like half of the women had already gone over there. So we're trying to get everybody to calm down, to come back. So we get our church ladies for sure, came back, and some of the visitor ladies came back and sat down and were like, let's just finish. It was right at the salvation time. We finished, and we went over there after we finished, and this car, I think it was running from the police. I never did get the whole story. Supposedly it was drunk or demon-possessed or something. And it had gone flying off the road, hit this culvert, crashed into a house, leveled a whole side of the house, then crashed into a tree, or flipped and then crashed into a tree and landed on its hood, like completely flipped upside down, landing on its hood. So Jerry's like, let's just get out of here, because stuff like that's when you get, mobs and riots. So we left. Well, today, this morning, our church lady who's in that neighborhood said all the neighbors were like gathering around her saying, your God's got to be some big, amazing God, those white people's God, because that area is, and those of you guys that have been here know there's always areas in neighborhoods where all the kids gather to play. Like they'll play soccer, just back and forth. Like kids in the States gather at a park. Here there'll be like a level spot under a tree that all the kids always play at every day. And that area where the car had ended up, he crashed the house. Nobody was at home, so they were fine. But that exact area under that tree is where all the kids play. And that's why all the women and all the moms started running and screaming over there, because they knew that's the area, like the neighborhood kid gathering area. But no kids were there, because guess where all the kids were? All 65 of them. Well, we had 65 sitting on the mats at our ladies' meeting. So there was not one kid at the kid area right where that car came flying through.
See, this is our text. This man was born blind because there was a job to do for the glory of God and the saving of souls. And as I thought about that song being written 10 years ago, and then just a few days ago seeing those 65 kids, no doubt a number of them would have been killed. And now people are asking them to come to that neighborhood, and they're receptive and open to the gospel. I believe that God saw and knew that that would take place, and he created Rachel and Jerry and a willing missionary to go because he had a task. I want you to look at your eye tonight. Think about your eye. Think about your name, your life, whoever you may be, wherever you may be, from wherever you may be, and ask yourself this question: is my eye a surrendered eye? Is my eye a faith-filled eye? And has my eye been placed in the center of God's will? The next word that we see quickly tonight is the word must. In verse number 4, Jesus said, I must. Now I want you to notice the importance of that word must tonight. That word must is not the word I should, or the words I should. The word must tonight is not the word I can. It's not I will, or I decided to, or I'm up for it, or hey, I get to, or hey, I'll do that. I must is an imperative. The I should is a conviction. The I can is an ability. The I will is a choice. The I decided to is a decision. The I get to is a desire. The I'm up for it is an option. Jesus said, I must die. He said, I must heal this man. Why? Because he was created for this moment. I must. And the lost and dying world was created for this moment, for this time, so that you and I would move from, hey, I will, I get to, maybe I should come to an altar, maybe I should go to Pastor Gibson and say, hey, I'm in. This is the moment. I've been hearing preaching all week long. I made good decisions, but the coffin is sealed. The deal is done. My life is surrendered. I moved from a good idea to a must. Just as if Aaron were to come to me during lunch, when I come home for lunch, and he said, Dad, Andrew and I are down at the pond fishing. Andrew's 3, Aaron's 10, and he's a great fisherman, loves to fish. And he said, Dad, we're down there fishing. I really would love for you to come down and go fishing. And I could feel the burden as being a good dad and wanting to spend time with him. And I'd say, I'm up for it. That's a good, I'll come. I want to. That's great. I'll do it. That's wonderful. I can do that. I'll decide to do that. And I could go. But if I got home from lunch and I sit down and put my feet up for a moment, Aaron come running in with tears streaming down his face, and this gives me chills. If you have children or grandchildren, you'll feel this weight or this feeling. And he says, Dad, Aaron was standing on the edge of the boat that's out in the water, Andrew, and he flipped over and I can't see him and the water's dark and he's been under for a minute. Now it's not an I get to, I want to, I will, sure, I decide to. It's a must. I've got to go. I've got to go. I've got to go. There's no question about it. I must. I remember being in 11th grade, growing up in a Christian home, wanting to do what's right. Sure, I'll do it. Sure, Mom. Sure, Dad. Sure, I'm in. Whatever's required of me, I'll do it. That's great. I will. But you understand, a lot of things can get into the way of good intentions. A lot of things can keep me busy from going down and fishing with my son. But if you ever cross over into a must, you'll be here. It doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter how sick you are, how poor you are, how bad you feel. When you move into a must, then you have moved into the steps of Jesus Christ that said, I have to. He was not a sinner. He wasn't born blind because of something he did. He was born blind because he must see light. And I've been placed to bring light to him. And I remember as an 11th grader at a camp in Illinois, Brother Mark Swanson was preaching and he began to play sirens. And the sirens kept going on. And I thought, come on. I was there just to sing. I was sitting in the back. Hey, I wasn't a rebel. I was just there because that's what we were supposed to do. I grew up in church. Everything's fine and dandy, but he kept playing these sirens. And I thought, come on, man, don't make it emotional. Let's just preach. And he was preaching and the sirens were going. I can't remember the message, but I do remember him saying something like, the hearses are pulled up to the door of your generation and they're loading the body bags of your generation in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now, in 2015, this was 01, in 2020, and it was hard to even think that far into advance. And before this moment, I thought, sure, I will. Sure, whatever God wants me to do, sure, I will. But that night, I moved into a must. I said, I must preach. I must surrender. I must live for God. And as I have been pastoring, there have been different opportunities and different influences that have come and floated my way and tried to influence me about this Bible and about living for Jesus, an old time religion, if you will. And what comes back to me over and over as I think about my in-laws and my parents and this long line of lineages saying, hey, I can't decide to. I can't want to. I can't think about it. I must live for God. I must stick with this Bible. I must win souls. There's a lost and dying world out there. And when we come through COVID and you think about the bus ministry and the world that mocks you and the world that doesn't understand you, but by the way, secretly they respect you. But when they say things, about you, there is a must that beats within my heart to say there's some little boy or girl that's going to die and spend forever in hell if we don't. It's not a good idea. It's a must. It's a must. And Jesus said, I must heal him. He was born for this moment. There are people that are waiting to be born again. If we could ever tonight just make a decision It's not a feeling. It's not an emotion. It's a decision to say, I must, because hell is real. I must because life is but a vapor. I must because Satan is real. A great door and effectual is opened unto me. And there are many adversaries, and we're living like we're at Disneyland Christians, and we're going to the rides, and hey, if it's convenient and the lines aren't long, we'll get in. And we'll have some fun, and we'll, live the Christian life. And God's looking for Christians that are not at Disneyland, but are in boot camp, and then on the front lines of the battle saying, hey, the bullets are flying, but I am in. I must raise my children for the Lord. I must be faithful to local church. You say, oh, come on, preacher. He said, as ye see the day approaching, so much the more, forsaking not the assembling of ours. I must win souls. I must read the Bible. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. And if you could have an I moment that you couple with a must, you are just this close to fully surrendering your life to the Lord Jesus Christ. But then it takes an action. Notice number 3, work. But what work? The works of him. He said, it's not my work, it's God's work. This is the moment, this is the time, this is the hour. He said, I must work the works of him that sent me. Never forget this. You and I are doing somebody's work. We're doing somebody's work. And Jesus said, I must work. People who do not know the Lord ask why in the world we waste our lives as missionaries. Nate Saint, missionary martyr to the Auca Indians. They forget that they too are expending their lives. And when the bubble has burst, they will have nothing of eternal significance to show for the years they have wasted. J. Hudson Taylor said, depend on God. God's work done in God's way will never lack God's supply. He is too wise a God to frustrate his purposes for lack of funds, and he can just as easily supply them ahead of time as afterwards, and he much prefers doing so. This week I was talking to a young businessman in our church, and he's been on Facebook and followed this 10X thing, and I don't know much about it. I can't speak positive or negative about it, other than the fact that he was saying it's about 10Xing your business, and every great leader who's ever done anything has poured 110%. And I said, hey, that's a Bible principle, right, Daniel? But Daniel was 10 times better, 10X, and everything in this generation, it's all the rage right now. 10X it, 10X it, 10X it, 10X it, 10X it. Except when it comes to God in these evangelical liberal circles, it's, well, set up your boundaries and don't get too busy and coffee shop it and sit back and have a good time. It's time that we burn up for Jesus Christ and work the works of him that sent us. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth into those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. People would ask my dad, how come God has blessed the Marion Avenue Baptist Church? And I pray that he's blessing it today. I can't speak of it right now. I'm just busy working in the ministry now. But speaking of some days when he was having these preachers meetings and these pastors would come, and he just says, we just work and we pray and we walk in the Spirit, and nothing comes by the flesh but by the power of God. But you got to have some work in prayer. You got to have some work in preaching. You got to have some work in ministry, and you got to work and you got to work and you got to work and you got to work, and you can't be out on the golf course, though, hey, golfing around's great or shooting a bow's great, but you have a pastor here that can enjoy. And by the way, I would promote it. He needs a little, take it from a pastor. You don't want us to come to the precipice of burnout. I've been close before at times, or depression, but let me just stop and say, you don't see all that's going around here through all the physical things that you see and greater spiritual things behind the scenes without knowing that there is a pastor in a church that says, I must work. I must work. There are lives on the line. There are people in North Liberty, and not just in North Liberty. You have to understand that this church is a world impact church. This church is encouraging churches and other church plants around the world, and Jesus says, I'm the only one that can do this. A body was prepared for me. I have been brought to earth for this. Not my will, but thine be done. And I must. It's not an option. They're drowning. They're sinking. There's going to come a day when we're out of here, and this space of grace, if you will be over, and we will enter into a great judgment, and it'll be nighttime. He said, I must. This man must be healed. And he said, I must work. Work's become a 4-letter word today. I would implore you, church, as you have worked all week long, I would encourage you, church, get a little bit of rest if you can this week. Get just a little bit of rest. But come Sunday, I didn't say next Sunday, come this Sunday, be in your place, be ready to work. Come early, dress sharp, get ready, lean in, go and tell them, say, hey, I'm ready to work. I'm still figuring out what I can do, how I can do. Hey, you help me out and I'll help myself out. I'm gonna find things I can do. I'll start picking up trash. I'll start being friendly to people and shaking hands and showing love with, but I must have a good marriage. I must have children and grandchildren that live for the Lord. I must have a heart that seeks God and read the Bible. I can't be spiritually starving. I must listen to the preaching and I must work for Jesus Christ. So that it can be said of me, for the glory of God, I have fought a good fight. It was a good fight. I've kept the faith, I've finished the course. Therefore, there comes a day when I'll sit down by the banks of that Jordan River, if you will. I'll sit down on heaven's side and I'll rest and enjoy the fruits of our labors